Good evening, and a very warm welcome to you this evening. My name is Ritchie from propertyCEO, and welcome to the Open Door Show. I'm here this evening. Well, I'm on my own this evening. There's not a soul around. We have no guest. We have no Ian. Ian Child, my business partner, is not here. Again, I'm flying solo. They let me in charge of this. I can do what I want. First of all, give me a hands up. Make sure you can hear and see me, please. Give me a hands up. That would be great. Yeah, some hands are going up. Good. I like it. So I'm here on my own. Probably going to be one of the best shows we've ever done because I can press all the buttons. I can do what I want, unless Ian's studio suddenly comes live and he comes on board, because he said he wasn't here, but you never know. You never know. It could be quite sneaky. He's not been furloughed. Don't worry. I think the furlough scheme's at an end. I haven't furloughed him. He's just not around this evening. So look, it's great to have you here. And over the next 45 minutes, we're going to be taking a deep dive, as always, into the world of small-scale property development. Above all, though, the important thing is, as always, we're going to have a bit of fun doing it, because I always say life is definitely far too short, okay? Far too short not to have a bit of fun. But I do need you to join in. Otherwise, I'm just going to be staring at the camera. I'm going to be chatting away. And if I don't get any response from all you people that have logged on, well, it's going to get a bit boring. I get a bit lonely. I get a bit of a conscience that no one's actually communicating with me. So you need to communicate. You need to put things in the chat box. You can put whatever you want in there. You can be rude if you want. You can be polite. You can ask questions. So please put questions in the chat box if you've got some questions, and I will do my best to answer them. I'm not sure we get through them all, as always, but I will do my best. So what have we got coming up this evening? Well, in a minute, I'm going to be talking about the 5 things that you need to know to get finance for your property development project. Is that going to be any good? Is that interesting? 5 things that you need to know. So grab a pen and paper. You might want to write these down. So first of all, let's have a look and see who's on. Let's just drop my list down. I see other people are just joining. Pardeep's just joined. Pardeep, you're running a few minutes late. Come on, my friend. You need to get in on time. Roman's on. Raymond's on. Christian's on. Derek's on. Hello, Derek. Good evening to you. Tanya's on. Tanya's still got her hand up. Let's drop Tanya's hand. Tanya's on. Who else is on? Raj is on. Ian's on. Jamie's on. Roma's on. Hello, Roma. Is Richard with you? And maybe the rest of the gang. Who knows? Maybe there's a party at Roma's house this evening. Monica's on. RK's on. Tim's on. Craig's on. Stephen's on. Paul, Liam, Adam, Jamie, Chris, Caroline, and indeed Harvey. And a few more. I do apologise if I haven't mentioned your name. I did as many as I could in one single breath, but I thought I'd faint, I'd collapse, and that would be no good because it's just me on the show tonight, so I can't afford to do that. So very welcome to you. So Tanya says hello. So hello to you, Tanya. Debbie says good evening. Looking forward to the show. Shame Ian's not here, she says. I don't know why she says that. I don't think it's a shame at all. I think it's going to be a great show. Let's have a look. Who else says? Stephen says good evening to you. Flying solo then, eh? Question mark. Waving. I think it's like a. Is that a? Oh no, it's a smiley face. I think it's a smiley face. Can't quite see that. Jamie says good evening. Looking forward to the show. Looking forward to understanding about finance. Caroline says good evening. Nice to see you again. Nice to see you as well, Caroline. So welcome to the show. Right. First of all, I'm going to talk about these 5 things, and it might prompt some questions. If it does, that's great. Put them in the chat box. If it doesn't, well, once I've finished talking about it, I'll just sit and stare at the camera until you do pop some questions in. So please pop some questions in as we go through. So I'm going to talk about 5 things, as I say, that you need to know to get finance for your development project. Now, let's just think about this. Most small-scale developers. Hello, Nick. Nick's just joined us. Come on, Nick. Catch up. We're just about to start. Most small-scale developers, experienced or otherwise, I would say, use other people's money to finance their projects. Okay, most small-scale developers do that, even the experienced ones. You might think that's not true, is it? Well, it is true. Okay, very few are able. So that's one thing. That very few are able, or perhaps if they are able, they're not willing to fund everything themselves. You might not have thought that. You probably think your developers are very wealthy, they're going to do it all. Well, those that are wealthy don't always fund everything themselves. Just as a landlord, and maybe there's some buy-to-let landlords on this evening, okay? So if indeed there are. Roma's put in, good evening, Richie. Nice to see you again. It's been a long time since this morning. Yeah, some of these, we got some of our students on this evening, and they did live Q&A this morning. I was flying solo on that again. It's like a one-man show round here now. Anyway, I'm assuming we've got some landlords on. And of course, what would you do if you're a landlord? You'd get a buy-to-let mortgage. Well, a developer will use commercial finance to fund both the asset and the purchase of the development pretty much in exactly the same way. The money is, I guess, is simply a tool. It's just another tool that you need to do the job. Okay, that's all you're going to do. You're going to hire it in to do the job. And of course, it gets returned at the end of the project with interest. once the job's done. So does this mean that you won't need to put any of your own money in? What's that wonderful phrase? No money down. Can we do no money down? You hear that, don't you, in networking circles? Oh, you're sort of great on you. No money down. I mean, people have coined this phrase. I mean, it's okay. Can you do it? Well, look, it's possible, okay, to use other people's money entirely. But what I will say to you, it's not the easiest route. So if you want to do that, you can, but it's not the easiest thing to do. Okay, so there you are. No BS, no fluff, which is what we do on Open Door. You can do it. You can do a whole development. You can make a six-figure sale without a single penny of your own money in. But the journey's just a little bit tougher. So if you don't mind it being a bit tougher, then you can do that. Now, what I will say, just in terms of what I'm talking about in finance, a word of caution. Okay, a word of caution. That's unlike me, isn't it? A word of caution. Don't forget that money lending is a heavy regulated business, a very heavily regulated business. There are lots of do's and don'ts that you shouldn't do in terms of approaching investors, particularly private investors. So make sure that you comply with the FCA rules. If not, I'll have to come and visit you in prison. And I don't mind, but I'm not going to come that often. Maybe I'll do once a quarter, particularly if you're up north. It's a long way, okay? So please don't break the FCA rules and go to prison. Even if it's an open prison, I'm sure it's not much fun. So grab your pen and paper. 5 things I'm going to give you this evening that will make finding the money for your next property development project, I would say, a lot easier, okay? So number one is use a commercial broker, okay? Use a commercial broker. I see a few of you still joining. Look at that, people still joining us. We're talking away. Dale's just come on, Fiona's come on, Nicholas come on, Yvonne's come on. We're talking this evening about money, guys. So if you just joined us, you missed the beginning. We're talking about 5 things you need to know to get finance for your property development project. With number 1 being use a commercial broker. Use a commercial broker. Now, some people think, no, I'm going to go direct. I'm going to go straight to the funders. That's what I'm going to do. Don't do that, guys. It's not the right route to go. Commercial lenders are generally specialists. Okay, this is not your typical high street. We did have a student once who said, I've been into Barclays or Lloyd's, I can't remember which one it was, and they don't seem to be that clued up. Well, they won't be, guys. You need to go to specialist lenders. Okay, so it's not your typical high street bank. And so don't worry about paying a bit of fee. Normally, that fee that the broker's going to get is paid for by the funders. So don't worry about that. Okay, you're going to get a better deal generally going through brokers than going direct. And there's going to be a lot of trips if you go direct, a lot of things. Because a lot of funders out there, they rely on commercial finance brokers to bring them the business, okay? The commercial broker is on your side. You might think, no, they're on the funder's side, but they're not. I've just told you they're not, okay? They are on your side. They're there to look after you, okay? Now, they sieve the deal. They check the deal. This is what the funders want. They want commercial brokers to check the deals and only send them deals that they think are appropriate for them. Because there will be some funders that don't like certain projects, don't want to work with certain developers. I don't mean like personality wise, but in certain geographical locations or on certain types of projects. So a broker will place you in the right position. So they are on your side. One thing I would say, and maybe write this down, if you're writing some notes down or if you're just sat there listening, then just remember this if you're able to do that. Transparency is critical. Write that down. It's a big word to spell. It starts with a T, ends in a Y. But that's transparency, by the way, not critical. Transparency is critical. The deal and your professional team, okay, and your development business, you need to expose all of those things. You need to tell them exactly what you're doing. So tell them about the deal. Tell them about the professional team. Tell them about you. Tell them about the development. And when you tell them about you, tell them about all the skeletons in the cupboard. Bring them all out. Tell them everything. If you've got a CCJ, and I don't know whether you have or you haven't, but if you have, or something, or you've dissolved a company, or you've liquidated, whatever you've done, okay? Not necessarily speeding fines, they're not normally a problem, okay? But anything that you've got business related, let them know. Because what'll happen otherwise, if you don't tell them, they'll go to a funder that they think is appropriate for you. The funder then uncovers that and then turns around and says, no, we're going to pull out of that one. And you get a black mark. And of course, a lot of these people know each other. So don't try and get away with stuff. They will find this stuff out. So if you've got a skeleton, if you've got, as I say, even a CCJ, tell them. And then the broker will place you in the right position. So be totally honest with your broker. Okay. One thing I would say that you got to, when you go to a broker, make sure you know what you're doing. Don't just rock up at a brochure and go, I've never done this before. A broker, sorry, not a brochure, a broker. Don't just rock up at a broker's and say, I've never done this before, but can you help me out? They're going to get tired of that. You need to be educated. You need to know what you're going to do when you speak to them. But a broker is on your side to tell them everything. Okay, that's the best route to commercial lenders. Number 2, write this one down or remember, build a brand. Build a brand. Okay, you'll need to inspire confidence. That's the important thing. People want to know that you're serious. Okay, and they want to know how knowledgeable you are. I mean, do you have a business plan? Do you have a team? We talked about team just now that ticks the right boxes. Do you understand your deal inside and out? Do you know what you're doing? Okay, and it's just not all about you. It's about a brand. People need to feel. Okay, they need to look at the deal, the proposition. They need to feel they're doing business with a company, with a brand, not just an individual. It's not just John Smith who's rocked up and says, I'm going to do this. When you've got a brand behind you, you inspire a huge amount of confidence, particularly if you present that brand through a website, through a company website. Personal branding comes into this as well. But if you present it in the right way, okay, and this gives you credibility. The one thing that you don't need to do, and many people do this, because I've seen them, and maybe you've done this, maybe you're guilty of doing this, is they give a load of old BS. They try and blag their way through it. Yeah, have you done any developments? Yeah, we've done a few. You haven't done any. Don't say, because they will catch you out straight away. But you can get this confidence and you can get this credibility straight away by building a brand in the right way, because then it will be presented to them. Okay, and just think about this. How many investors, commercial or private, didn't try to check out the potential developer's website before they agreed to lend the money? How many do you think that is? That's a zero, big fat zero. You would, if someone said, "Oh, can you lend me some money?" What would you do? You check them out. You try, and of course, if they haven't even got a website, you wouldn't even bother. Let me just tell you a little story off-piste, okay? Just slightly off-piste, but it's related. I went to a networking do once. It was a property networking do, and this guy had come for a couple of sessions, and then I happened to sit next to him, and I remember him from the previous couple of months. And he rocked up and he said, "Oh, hello." He said, "How are you?" I said, "I'm very good, thank you very much," because indeed I was. And he said, "I've got my new business cards." Well, that'd be a bit of a treat. So he said, "You like one?" I said, "Oh, yes, please. Thank you very much." He gave me a business card, and no word of a lie. Okay, it was about a 60-gram paper. They were printed out on a home printer, and he scissor cut them. He didn't even get a guillotine, guys. Scissor cut them cut them up. So they're a flimsy piece of paper, printed, all crooked edges. They were quite nice, but what does that tell you? What does that initial brand, that image, tell you about the individual? And he says, "Would you lend me 40,000 quid?" You just smile, wouldn't you? Just smile, and you probably do about 100 miles in the opposite direction. So brand is important. Number 3, learn how to analyze your deals robustly. Okay, know how to analyze a deal, because what's going to happen? These funders, they are going to kick pretty hard, your tires until they fall off. Car analogy, got to have a car analogy because I'm a petrol head, but they will, guys. They will be kicking, they will be breaking your deal. Do your costs look reasonable? Are you anticipating profit numbers that are prudent or completely pie in the sky? What happens if the market changes? Have you taken that into account? Have your numbers been stress tested? Okay, so you need to have good numbers. You need to have a robust deal analysis that will stand up to critique by people that know what they're doing. So you need to learn not only how to analyze deals correctly and thoroughly, but how to make your deal analysis also look highly professional. So you've got to present it in the right way. You've got to prove that you've done that stress testing, that you analyze your deal, that you understand it, that you've got enough margin. It's not pie in the sky, because they're going to kick it pretty hard. So the word there is robust. A deal that stands up to critique, that stands up to stress testing, okay, that stands up to that analysis by people that know what they're doing. If you go in with a half-hearted effort deal, or you don't really understand how to do deal analysis, and I've seen people do that, and I've sat having a cheeky beer with brokers over the years, and not recently, obviously, because we've not been allowed. We soon will be, but I think we can actually. We can have a beer now, can't we? Anyway, that aside, I've sat with them and often talked to them, and they said, "Oh, it's outrageous. Sometimes we get an agent's details, we get a hand scribbled piece of paper saying they're going to make 20% profit or whatever out of it. What do we think? Could they get us some money? How does that make you look? Now you'll probably laugh. I wouldn't do that. People do. But just take it to the extreme. You need a robust deal that stacks up to critique. Number 4. Okay, number 4. Then I'm going to start doing some questions, because I can see some questions that have come in. Cast your net far and wide. It's not a fishing analogy just because Ian's not here. I'm not getting into fishing. I'm not on that slippery slope. Anyone a fisherman, give us a hands up if you like fishing. That's always interesting to know if anyone actually likes fishing. Give us a hands up if you like fishing. Not many hands. In fact, there's no hands gone up. No one likes fishing. That's brilliant. I love that, guys. I should tell him tomorrow that no one likes fishing on Open Door Webinar Show. So he should be banned because Ian likes fishing. So we should ban him from the show because we don't want any fishermen on here. Can't think of anything worse than watching paint dry. Anyway, cast your net far and wide. Commercial lenders are probably the traditional route when it comes to finding finance, but they're not the only choice. What about peer-to-peer lending, crowdfunding? Okay, you've heard of crowdfunding? I'm sure you guys have. The premise is simple. You know, the peer-to-peer lender, they source the funds. I'm not talking about you going out and putting an advert on Facebook and say, can 12 trillion people lend me £10 and put it in my account so I can go and do a development? No. I'm talking about the lender that secures the funds, okay, from lots of other different private investors. Okay, so they bring in the money. That's on one hand, they bring in the money, and then they arrange for the money, okay, to be lent to developers on the other. So they bring it in from a number of developers. They don't do it in pounds, they do it in reasonable sized chunks. A lot of them have minimum investment criteria, okay, and they bring it in and they lend it out. Now, don't think though this is any easier, because just like commercial lenders, they're pretty good at critiquing deals, okay, which means that their lenders can have confidence that only good developers with decent deals, robust deals, will be put forward. So but they are another route, but don't think they're an easier route. Okay, they're as good a route, absolutely, and there are some really good crowdfunders out there, some really good organizations that will fund your deals, and you need to have one of them in your tool bag. You need to have a few things: traditional lenders, traditional brokers, some crowdfunders, and perhaps also maybe some investment clubs, maybe some other groups, maybe some high net worth angel investors. You probably need all of these sort of things. Now, you're not going to get it all at once, and traditional brokers are probably going to suffice for your first deal, or maybe a crowdfunding platform. But in time, think about getting alongside some high net worth individuals, because you never know when you might want a quick bit of investment, and you can build relationships with these people, and you think, well, I don't know who they are, but they are out there, guys. Make it a point to go and network with them. There's places you can find them. I mean, you've only got to go to car clubs or tennis clubs, or you know, go down the local flying club or stuff like that. They're out there, guys. There's a lot of high net worth individuals. Go to expensive car meets and things. They're out there. Just start chatting to people. You never know who you're going to meet. Okay, so as I say, cast your net far and wide. My little fishing analogy. And then finally, number 5. And then I'm going to do some questions. Don't have the time for fishing, that is. Someone says fishing for deals. That's quite funny, isn't it? Fishing for deals. Okay, look, the deal is king. The deal is king. There is a tendency for new property developers to place too much importance on private investment. That's true. I mean, how many of you out there are sort of panicked about private investment, are worried about that private investment, are stressed about that private investment? Who's going to lend me money? I don't like asking for it. That's the biggest problem. Do I find the money or do I find the deal? Is it the deal or is it the money? Or do I both at the same time? You stressed from that? Anyone ever thought about that? Anyone suffered from that? Anyone suffering from that? We all have. When we've ever entered this world of development, we've always thought about the money. As I said earlier, you know, maybe I don't have enough. I just don't have enough money. And then what if I find a deal and then I don't have enough money and I've got to get this money? All the importance is on the money. And then what happens? You go cap in hand. I've not got a cap on tonight, so I could have demonstrated that if I had, but you go cap in hand. And then you are desperate. You're desperate to persuade investors to lend to them. That's what you want, to lend to you, sorry. That's what you do. And your whole body language is subservient. You know, you crouch over. You become shorter. Not as short as me, I'm quite short. But you know what I mean? When you're after something, you're subservient to it. You're not held high. But actually, that's completely wrong. Let me tell you, and whether you believe me or not, you might think I'm barking mad, which you might be partly true. It might be correct. Maybe I am. But this is definitely true. There's a lot more money out there that needs homes, that needs investing, than there is property deals. And property deals will return 8 to 10%. So it's the developer, it's you, okay, that has the upper hand when it comes to finding investors. It's not the other way around. Who has the opportunity? Who has the deal? Well, you do. You've got to think of this. How many other people have rocked up to that potential private investor and offered them 8 to 10% in the last week or two, the last month or two, the last year or two? The chances are not very many, not very many at all. So you've got to think of it. You've got to switch that thinking. You have that opportunity. Do not be desperate. Do not go cap in hand. So there we go. 5 top tips. Use a commercial broker. Build a brand. Learn how to analyze your deals robustly and present them correctly. Cast your net far and wide. And just remember, the deal is king. The deal is absolutely the most important thing. Okay, there we go. Hopefully that was interesting. Let's see if we've got a few questions coming in. So I see a few other people have joined us. Ron's joined us, B's joined us, Chloe's joined us. If you missed me rabbiting on about investment, and basically I was talking about 5 things you need to know for investment to get finance for your property, you can listen to the replay. You can listen to the beginning, and if you missed number 1, maybe number 2, I don't know when you joined. I didn't see you come, but welcome to the show. Okay, let's see what questions we have got in here that we can start answering. So I've got a question here from Liam. Good evening, Liam. He says, how much money do I need of my own to start in property development? Well, Liam, look, the truth is, if you didn't have any, you could still do it, but it's harder, as I say. But what you ideally need, Liam, if you had, let me say, as little as £15,000, okay? If you had as little as £15,000, I could show you how you could leverage that into £250,000 profit. You got 15,000? Do you want to leverage that into £250,000 profit? I know Liam's probably shouting yes. So, but Liam, if you had that, that would get you on the ladder. Now, alongside that, if you had another little bit of extra cash, maybe you've got 5 or 6, maybe 10 for fees, to pay some upfront fees. Maybe you've got to pay a bit of legal fees. Maybe you've got to get the accountants to set up the company and so on and so forth. Provided you've got another bit of cash around just to pay a bit of upfront fees. I'm not necessarily talking about paying all the professionals. That all comes out the development funding. Then, 25 grand, you're easily in. 15 grand, you could probably do it. Hopefully, Liam, that answers your question. Sadie says, good evening. I have heard that at the moment, lending is really difficult to get. What is your view on this? My view on that is that that's complete hodgepodge. It's not difficult, Sadie. It's perfectly reasonable. Look, lending actually has had lots of regulations tightening up. The anti-money laundering rules, and I talked about FCA rules just now. Those checks are getting tougher and tougher and tougher. So that does make some lending a little bit more difficult. And it certainly is more difficult if you're looking to go and buy a house and you haven't got the right multipliers, or you're likely to be furloughed, or your salary isn't there, or you got too much debt, and so on and so forth. That is definitely much more difficult to get a mortgage than it used to be. You could actually almost, in the old days, you could go out just as well, go through Waitrose, and you could pop in your basket a loaf of bread, a pint of milk, and a mortgage. Do you remember? And that used to be so easy. They just used to give them away. That has tightened up. So Sadie, to some extent, lending is very difficult to get in that market. In the development space, I mean, it's not easy. You're not just going to rock up and get it. I talked this evening about having a brand. So Sadie, if you haven't got a brand, and if you don't present yourself in the right way, you don't present a robust deal analysis, then you ain't going to get the money. It's as simple as that. But if you have all of those things in place, and you have a cracking deal that's robust and stands up to testing, stands up to that stress testing, then the money, actually, I'm going to say easy. The money is easy to get, because the money is out there in abundance. If the money wasn't there, then that would be a challenge. But the money is there, and the money is there ready and available for good deals. So Sadie, the money is absolutely out there. It is entirely possible to get. Okay, let's have a look. Next question. Where's my mouse gone? Because I need to scroll up here. Tanya says, hello, Tanya. She says, I'm looking at a plot of land that's a former sandpit. Sandpit, we used to have one in the garden for the kids. I don't know, I presume it's bigger than that. I've looked at the town plan, the services on the road, other properties in the area, planning history, deal analysis, etc. Okay, well done. I'm going to put in an offer subject to planning. Is there anything that I should be looking into prior to this? Yeah. So, well, Tanya, what I'd say is, does the deal stack up? So you said that I'm looking at a plot of land. Okay. So you've looked at all these other bits and pieces, town plan associates. So does the deal stack? Have you done a deal analysis? Because I'm assuming you have, but if you haven't done a deal analysis, how do you know what the land's worth? Okay, so that's one thing. And the deal analysis means you've got to do a market area comparison. Are you going to sell this thing or not sell this thing? You've got to know all of that stuff. The other thing I'm going to say to you, Tanya, why are you looking at a scheme that needs planning? Why? Is it, Tanya, that you like to do things the most difficult route out there? And I'm not being harsh, but the planning system, Tanya, in this country is broken. It's hard work. Okay, it is really hard work. And you know, how long is it going to take you to get that planning? Are you buying? You might say, I'm going to buy it subject to planning, but yeah, how long is it going to take? You know, and Tanya, there's easier deals. I don't want to put. Well, I do want to put you off it in a sort of a roundabout sort of way. I want to make you think about this because there are easier deals. There are much easier deals. We talk about permitted development right quite a bit on this show. If you're interested, I can tell you, you can come and spend some more time with us, and I'll tell you exactly about permitted development rights, Tanya. But the key thing is, you know, if you're going to go down the road and try and get planning, it just is open-ended. So that does concern me. It concerns me for you. It won't affect my life, but it might affect yours. That you might be a year down the road and you still haven't got planning. So please seriously think about that. Other things that you want to think about, just historically, if it's been a former sandpit, has that been backfilled? Okay. Is that just been excavated with sand and that's it? Now you've got the virgin ground at that level. Or has that been backfilled? Has it been re-excavated? Because often they excavate one area, they backfill another area and so on. So there are some geotechnical questions, ground investigation questions. So what I'd strongly suggest, Tanya, is get a structural engineer, okay? Get a structural engineer on board, get them to have a look at it to see whether they think there could be any implications. Stability of the ground, you know, what else is going on? What are the foundation costs likely to be or not likely to be? You know, have they excavated all the sand? What's the water table like? There's lots of things that you need to be thinking about. Is it in a floodplain? That could be an issue. Be very careful of that. You know, building new houses in floodplains, or that's a no-no. You don't want to be doing that. And of course, you might think it looks cheap, so because everyone else has walked away because it's in a floodplain. So floodplain, think of the existing ground, but be very careful about going for a planning scheme, Tanya, because you don't need to. There are easier things to do out there in life. You know, I always think, you know, if you've got a route to go, you know, you can go over the mountain or you can go around it. Well, let's just go around it. Let's find an easier route in life. I don't know if that's a good analogy, but that's the one I was going to use this evening. Okay, Derek says, hello, Derek. Good evening to you, my friend. I hope you are well. I've known Derek for many, many years, actually. So Derek's known me for an equal amount of time. Once you have done your numbers and worked out how much funding you will need, what additional contingency should you add to your total to ensure that you have enough funds for the whole project and do not need to look for more funds before you complete the project? Good question, Derek. Look, contingency, first of all, is 10% on the build cost. So you want to have 10% contingency on the build cost, absolutely. And you don't want to reduce below that, guys. Seriously, and if your project manager turns around and says, well, I reckon we could do this for 5%, don't. Have at least 10%. I think the other thing then is it's about understanding the prudence that you may or may not have in the deal. And only you will know that as you calculate that out. So when you've done your, let's look at the sale values. When you've done your market area comparison report, sorry, I've talked about a market area comparison report. It's a MAC report. It's a process we teach students, but basically understanding and trying to predict what you're going to sell this for in X months time. There is a process to do that. It's not just ringing up an estate agent and asking them. That is completely the wrong thing to do. So once you've done a market area comparison report and you've looked ahead, when you do those reports, when you understand how to do that type of reporting and analysis, you're going to know whether you were able to find comparables, what the market is doing, and how prudent you've been, how much you've pushed the envelope. Okay, so have you been a bit conservative in your numbers, or you've been a bit optimistic? And then by the same token, all of your other numbers will have been built up in the same manner. You know, when you've been looking at construction costs, have you just been a little bit, you know, optimistic in what it's going to charge or what it's going to be? And you've got to take a view on that. And you need to take a view on the wider market. So at the moment, you know, the out there right now, construction materials are very hard to find and they are quite expensive. And I'm having dinner tomorrow night with a project manager friend of mine and a quantity surveyor, his quantity surveyor wife. We're going out for a bite to eat. And I'm sure we'll be talking about, well, we're not going to talk too much about construction materials because that would be a boring evening, but we will probably touch on it. And he no doubt will tell me, and his good lady, who's the qualified surveyor, will say that materials are in great shortage and they're expensive, and that's putting more cost onto project tenders. So if you're about to go into the market now, you would want to consider that. Okay. If you're actually starting your journey now, don't think about that. Wouldn't worry about that, because that will settle down. That will play itself out. So if you're putting a project that you're going to build out maybe mid next year, I wouldn't worry about that. But if you see fluctuations in the market, so going back a couple of years when we had the Brexit stuff all going on, it would have been prudent in your financial borrowing to actually have a little bit of headroom. And you can negotiate and you can deal with your funders on that basis. So what you can say to your funder is, I want £300,000 or whatever number you need, 500, 700, doesn't matter. I need 700 to do this, but I'd like to borrow 800. Okay, I'd like to have a facility for 800. Now, the way this works, you don't necessarily pay the interest on the money that you don't draw down. You're only paying interest on the money you draw down, and the interest is rolled up. So if you don't need that extra headroom, it's not going to cost you any more. But what I can tell you, if you don't have that headroom, and I think this is the gist of this question, I know I'm going around in circles here and making it quite lengthy, but hopefully this information is useful. If you don't have that headroom and you have to go back and refinance, they've got you over a barrel, because they can charge you all sorts of finance fees, revaluations, all sorts of things, and they can charge you additional rates. And of course, they've got you by the short and curlies. So negotiate that headroom in. If you're not entirely sure what's going on, definitely negotiate some headroom into your deal, even if you don't need the money. Hopefully that has helped. Okay. Roman says, good evening, Roman. I hope you're well, my friend. He says, still finding it difficult to understand the importance of your business card. Nobody else seems to use them anymore. Well, that'll make you stand out if you do then. I don't agree with you, Roman. I don't think people don't use business cards anymore. I think they do. And of course, there are those times that you might be asked for it and you don't give it. But, you know, what do you do if you go out networking? I mean, how do you, and I know you might say, well, we do virtual networking. Well, we do at the moment, but we are getting back in the room. And the government says we're going to be allowed to do that as of Monday. And I believe many networking groups around the country have now, apparently, I know one of the big national ones, have been massively oversubscribed for people getting back into the room. And what are you going to do, Roman, when you go out there and someone said, well, that's great, Roman, it's great to meet you. Well, shall I give you a call? What are you going to say? Yeah, okay, well, my number is 07771, etc., etc. Okay, I don't think that is Roman's number, so don't give him a call. But you know what I mean? No, I haven't got a pen. So you might say, well, let me just ring you, I'll text you. It's all clunky, isn't it? Then the person's got to put it in. What's wrong with just giving a business card out? And I don't agree with you. I think many people are still giving business cards out. Okay, you need to have that ability and the quality of that business card. And I don't mean it has to be, you know, gold plated, etc., but it just has to be right. And you know, we teach our students that some of the tips and tricks of what needs to be there, how that needs to work. And I think I go back to that guy who had the paper business card. You know, you tell me, I'm out there, I'm a potential private investor, and I rock up and I meet 3 people at a networking do. I met the guy that I met, okay, who turned up with a 60-gram piece of A4 paper cut out with scissors. He gives me his business card, okay. I meet then someone else. I meet John Smith. Tanya's on the team. I meet Tanya, okay. Tanya gives me a business card, and it's a nice quality business card, and it's got all our details on it. And then I meet you, Roman, and you say, so I don't have a card. I don't have a card. I think, well, now who am I more interested to invest with? Which one has stood out to me? Well, Tanya stood out. The A4 paper one, he's out. He's gone straight away. And you're suspect because you haven't even been bothered to do a business card. So hopefully that's enough convincing. If it's not, well, look, tell me again. Tell me it's not, and I'll try and convince you one more time. I think we'll get there in the end. Okay. Let's have a look. Okay, Tim says, is there ever a place for bridging finance in property investment, or is it just bad, full stop? Oh, is it bad? Tim, it's not bad, but it is bad. Now, I know that's nonsensical, but this is the truth. So let me just tell you what I mean, Tim, because that's a good question, okay? When are we going to use bridging, okay? Because bridging is expensive. Okay, bridging is an expensive way to get finance. So when are you going to use bridging? Anyone know when you're going to use bridging? I mean, I'm not actually put it in the chat box, but you're going to use bridging when you can't use development finance. Because why would you not use development finance if it's going to be cheaper than bridging? Well, you can't get development finance if you haven't got planning permission or permitted development rights. So what that's telling me, Tim, if you're going to have to use bridging, you've got risk. So what was I just saying now about building in a sandpit and with no planning permission, etc., etc.? So if you're going to go and buy a project that's got no planning permission, you're going to go and buy a building that hasn't got a permitted development right to convert it into maybe residential or whatever it is you want to do. Or you're going to buy a plot of land, or you're going to buy a sandpit and you're going to put a couple of houses on it, and you haven't got any planning permission. Then you're going to have to bridge it if you can't do it subject to planning. And let's not get too far into subject to planning, let's just focus on bridging. So on that basis, you're going to bridge this, okay? And you've bought this piece of land, Tim, on hope value. Because you think, yeah, if I get planning, if I pay 200 for this or whatever it is, then if I get planning, I'll be quits in. This would be great. This would be a great deal. So you buy it, and you're going to pay a little bit of a premium, probably, okay? Compared to if there was absolutely no hope of getting planning, you'd pay less. Even if you think you've got it below market value, if you knew there was absolutely no hope of getting planning, you would pay less, wouldn't you, Tim? I think the answer is yes, okay? So on that basis, you are going to pay a little bit of hope value, and I'd have to be a job to be convinced otherwise. And then on top of that, you've now bridged it, and you're paying bridging finance, which is probably also most likely have to be serviced monthly. So you're probably going to have to pay at the very least some interest charges monthly. So how are you going to cash flow that? Okay, so you've got to cash flow that where development funding is rolled up and you pay it out at the end when you sell the units. So you're paying your bridging finance on the drip. And then let's say, okay, you get your deal and it all works out fine. So that's terrific. The bad thing about this is what happens, Tim, or indeed anyone else, if you don't get planning permission. What happens if you get refused? And even if you went for appeal, you still get refused. Now, what situation are you in, Tim? You're in a situation now where you've just devalued that piece of land. Because if I was going to look at that land, you've now just shown me undoubtedly, without any hesitation, that I can't get planning because you've tried it and you've been refused. Unless you've done a completely mad scheme, and I don't think you're going to be doing that, my friend. So on that basis, you've devalued the scheme. So it's probably worth less than what you paid for it. And you've had to pay those interest charges all the way through. So on that basis, it is a bad idea because it means you are going down the difficult route. Like I said earlier, you're going over the mountain, you go round it. Tim, you can do a scheme with permitted development rights where you don't need to go bridging, where you get development funding, which is going to be a lot cheaper, and there's more certainty. In fact, we want certainty because development is risky enough as it is, guys. Why take on another element of risk? You don't need to do that. There's no point doing it. There's absolutely no point. So that's what I would say about bridging. It's bad, in my opinion, for a new developer, not an established, and you can take a few more risks, but for a first-time developer, it's bad because that means you're going down the wrong route and you're not doing the scheme which has got PD rights or planning in place, preferably PD rights, because you've got planning in place, you're not necessarily adding any value. Hopefully, Tim, that's given you an interesting response. Okay, let's have a look. So wow, look, Ronex says he agrees. Good quality, 100 grams per square meter business cards. Good, I'm glad you agree with me. Let's have a look. Other people putting comments in. My fold-out business cards are still very well received. They work very well, says Derek. Fold-out business cards, I love it, absolutely. Nicholas says, would you recommend any really good Audible books on commercial conversions? Beginner's version. I don't know any Audible books. If you want to read a decent book, which actually is just being updated at the moment, which is our book, but you're going to have to read it, Nicola, or you're going to have to get someone else to read it, in which case then that effectively would be Audible. So if you could actually convince a friend or family or a loved one or whatever, or a bloke down the pub, I don't know, just to read it to you, Nicola, then it becomes Audible. We've got a book out, and this is not just flogging our book, because I think it's on Amazon at cost. It's all about industrial conversions. Bear in mind, just at the minute, it's out of date slightly in terms of all the current permitted development rights. But in terms of a beginner's book to get you thinking and understanding about conversions, it's a good place to start. And it is about to be updated soon. So, Nicola, that might be, but that won't be for a couple of months. So if you want to wait a couple of months, watch this space. We'll tell you when it's going to be there, probably October. But if you want to grab one now and start getting someone down the pub to read it to you, then go ahead. Okay. Oh, look at this. Look, we got Ranjit here. Ranjit from Property Investor News getting a cheap ad in. He says, "Good evening, Ritchie, Ian, and all." Ranjit, I don't know if you've noticed, Ian's not actually here. So that's unbelievable. You've just joined the show and you've made a schoolboy error by not looking at the screen and realizing Ian's not here. And he says, Ranjit Singh here from Property Investor News. It's a good read, by the way, guys. If you're not subscribed to Property Investor News and you're thinking of getting into property development, then I would say that is well worth a read. Not a very expensive subscription. And if you get a hold of Ranjit Singh, probably Google him on Facebook or something like that. He'd probably do you a deal. You heard it here first. Okay, Mike says, can you get projects funded 100%? Yes, I can. Thank you very much, Mike. I guess Mike's saying, can he get projects 100% funded? Well, I mentioned earlier. So yes, you can. Maybe, Mike, you're having a little snooze. I don't know. But look, yes, you can. You can get 100% funding. It is entirely possible. Someone the other day said to me, "Oh, you can't get 100% funding. I was told you can't get 100% funding because I don't have an experience." But yes, you can. You can. And I could point you to a student, brand new student, who got 100% funding offered. Now, unfortunately, she got gazumped on the scheme, but she got 100% funding offered on a scheme that would have yielded £1 million profit. How about that with a first deal? I'm not saying you're all going to go and do that for your first deal, so don't start dreaming and ordering the Porsche just yet, guys. Maybe $250,000, maybe 100,000 for your first deal. But the point is, she got that funding. Now, with the 100% funders, you've got to give something away. That deal, from memory, was like, I think it was a 40 or 45, 55 profit split. 55 in your favor, okay? But the 100% funders took the other 45, okay? Now, you might give away 45%, but 55% of something is better than nothing. So if you don't have any money and you want to start development, why wouldn't you do that? What you need, though, it goes back to those points, okay? You need a really good deal. You need a really good brand, probably a decent business card as well. You know, you need to know and have a robust deal analysis. So you need those things in place to go and get 100% funding. So, Mike, yes, it is entirely possible, okay? Hi, Ritchie, Ronak says. Where is Ian, please, says Jenny. Where is he? Well, he's not here, Jenny. He's just not available this evening, and he's not furloughed. I've not buried him under the patio. He is still around. Don't worry about that. He's just not here. So I'm sure you're concerned for him, Jenny, but he's not here this evening. So anyway, there you go. Just me. Much better, isn't it? Anyway, Ronak says, let's see if we can do one more question before we need to wrap up. Hi, Ritchie. Is there any way to get permitted development on an A3 restaurant, or would it require planning? We're getting into permitted development questions tonight. Well, Ronak, 100%. You're going to wait many weeks. 1st of August, Ronak, and then A3 restaurants, you have full permitted development rights to convert them into residential, if that's what you want to convert them to. That's because last September they were put into Class E, use Class E, and on the 1st of August, under permitted development right change, Class MA, you've just put it in the chat box as I'm talking, Ronak. Absolutely, Class MA, you can convert an A3 restaurant, okay, into residential. There are some rules, okay, there's some rules around. It's got to be vacant for 3 months, it's maximum 1,500 square meters, etc., etc., etc. There's a few rules, but yes, absolutely, under PD, you can convert it, Ronak. So get out there, find yourself a restaurant, go and make yourself a decent 6-figure sum. How about that? How about that? Let's see if I can squeeze one more question. There's quite a lot of questions, guys, coming in, and I know I'm not going to get to them all. I do apologize, but let's have a look. Let's see. Let's pick one out. Let's see who the lucky winner is of the last question. Claire's asking, what is the key for a developer to get funding support for their deals? Claire, I just told you 5 key tips earlier. You'll have to go listen to the replay, my friend. I'm not going to tell you again. Okay, Oliver, you are the lucky winner. Buy yourself a cheap bottle of wine this evening, my friend, because you have got the last question. And he says, good evening. Good evening, 18. There's no 18. There's no team tonight. It's just me. Pay attention, you guys. Do you have to pay professional team members, i.e. architects, up front when the work is completed? Yes and no. I'm doing quite a bit of that tonight, and I'm giving these mixed answers. Oliver, look, you might have to pay some money up front, but the majority will come later and be funded by the deal. So sometimes you're going to have to pay a little bit of money up front to get the architect doing out some initial plans, maybe the structural engineer to go and do some investigation of your sand pit, if that's where you want to build, as we talked about earlier. But the majority of their fees would come later, and they would be part of the drawdown. Okay, so you haven't got to pay all the fees up front. What you can often do as well is negotiate with these professionals and maybe say to them, well, look, I don't have enough money to pay up front, or not necessarily say I haven't got enough money. I'd rather roll your fees up and get them as part of the drawdown and let them enhance their fee slightly. So maybe let them put another 5 or 10% on their fees, or whatever you want, a few £100, and they can then get paid when the development funding comes down. And often they will do that. Which means you haven't got to fund it up front. So when I said earlier, how much do you need? We talked about how much you need to get into a deal. I can't remember who asked that now. It's further up the question marks there. But, if you had the 15,000 to get into the deal to make £250,000, then you don't need so much money to fund other people. There you go, Oliver. Hopefully that has answered that question. Guys, look, there we go. I mean, this seemed to fly. I don't know what happened there. The evening completely seemed to fly. Maybe that's because I'm flying solo this evening. Oliver, you asked the question earlier. I can't remember. I think Ronak asked a question. Someone else was asking questions as well about what you could and what you can't do with development. Guys, if you want to come and join us, I've got a 3-hour event. It's not till August though. There is one coming up in August. Use this link if you want, propertyceo.co.uk/roadmap. If you want to come and spend 3 hours with myself and Ian, yeah, he will be around then. I'll absolutely promise that. You want to come and spend 3 hours with us, and we'll tell you all about projects. We'll tell you about permitted development rights. We'll tell you about raising money. We'll tell you about how you find deals, all those things you want to know. And also, I'll give you top. That was difficult to say. Let me start again. I'll also give you 6 top tips of risk, of how you can control risk in development. Okay. We'll also talk to you about being a landlord developer. So if you're interested in that, it's in August. I think the first week or two in August. We've got a couple of free. You don't have to pay for them. You can turn up completely free. It's a virtual meeting, so we're happy to provide tea and coffee and biscuits as well. So you can turn up for 3 hours and spend a whole evening with myself and Ian. What's not to like about that? Guys, hopefully you've enjoyed the show. If you have, please pop it in the chat box. If you've enjoyed the show, especially with me flying solo, please pop that in the chat box. Even if you don't put it in the chat box, I will make it up just in case Ian listens to the replay. Next week's show is Thursday, the 22nd of July. It's the same time at 7 o'clock. And we have a guest next week. So we have Paul Sams. Paul Sams is the head of property at Dutton Gregory Solicitors. He's a senior partner and he's head of property. What he doesn't know about property, deals and liaisons is it's not worth knowing. He's a really good guy, a great friend of mine, known him for many, many years. So if you want to come and ask Paul Sams all about how you actually get the right deals, structure the right deals, get the legals across the line, and let's see if he's got any less busy now. Some of the stamp duty stuff has stopped, but generally he's dealing with commercial stuff, so he's probably okay. So if you want to come and join us Thursday 22nd next week at 7 o'clock, come and have a chat with Paul Sams and myself. So let's see how we got on. Let's see who says what about the show. Ron says, love Paul. Yeah, I thought I was asking for comments about the show, not about Paul Sams. He says he loves Paul. Thank you, Ian, for an informative evening. Thank you, Ian. Ronak, that's not even funny. That's not even funny. Derek says, thank you. Great solo effort. Very well done. Ron says, entertaining as always. Thanks, Richie. Adam says, great show. Absolutely loved it. Who is Ian? Ah, interesting. Thanks very much, Adam. Jamie says, great show as always. Love the top tips. Brilliant. Love the humor. Carolyn says, great fun. Smiley face. Happy to see you. Just checking, Richie says, Ronak. Yeah, just checking if I'm on the ball. Thanks for answering all of our questions. I didn't answer every single question. Maybe I've answered yours, Tanya's. Time to play in the sandpit now. Off you go. Enjoy your play in the sandpit, Tanya. Enjoy your evening. See you next week. Good night. Bye-bye.